Hello everyone and welcome back to Crayon Code. Today we're going to build a nice little product card in 3 different variants. So let's get started right away with some markup. Okay, so let's first create a new blank index.html. And by typing exclamation mark and hitting tab once, it's basically creating a blank HTML file with an HTML5 boilerplate. And today we're going to make a product card. So, let's keep this that way. Good. Now that this markup here is actually quite simple. We have a main section, and let's give this main section the class product because we're making a product card, and we're having it in 3 different variants. So we're directly starting with a class for variant blue because this is our default variant. And the card basically consists of 2 main sections. One is the actual product image on the left side, where we're just going to put an empty div because this one will serve as the actual image container. And now still inside the main tag, we have the actual details section here, product details. Now and here it gets a little bit more. We are having on one hand a header where we're putting the title for the Python 3.14, of course. And let's put a little paragraph here for a little bit of a description, as it is colorful, powerful, and wonderful, of course. Now the selection for the individual product variants are going to be put in an unordered list, which has the class product variants. And of course, since we're an unordered list, we have an li tag for each product variant. And since each li represents a different product variant, they're also going to have the actual, and here we need a dash because we are working with a modifier class here, because we're working with BEM, and the currently selected product variant is getting also the active class. We're not going to put any content in here because we're purely working with colors, so that's why we actually don't need any content. And we have 3 different variants here. Now after blue comes pink, and then comes orange. Very nice. Good. Okay. Let's also give the capacity of the phone, which is given in the capacity class. And let's actually just put 512 gigabytes. And finally, the price itself, which is also wrapped inside a div and has the class product price here. And let's put it for 1,096 euros. Good. Okay. Oh, that one does actually not belong here. So let's open this with live server. You can see that, looks quite messed up. So let's get this taken care of with some styling. So we're creating a new file, style.css. Let's actually make it plural, style CSS, and reference this one inside the head. Here, where we're going to put a link tag that relates to a style sheet, which will be of type text/CSS, and the href is simply going to be style CSS. Let's also use a different font. Here from Google Fonts, I copied the settings for Montserrat in variant different weights from 100 to 900. I'm not sure which ones we're actually going to use, so we can reduce this later. Good, now let's get this actually pretty by starting with a basic reset, where we're going to put padding to 0, margin to 0, and where we're going to set the box sizing to border box for every element inside the page. Already takes effect, very nice. Inside the root selector, let's also define a default background color, which is simply going to be, let's use a black, so no need for RGBA, just write black. And the foreground color will be a slightly faded white. Let's say 90%. Good. Okay, now as the base font size, we will be having 36 pixel. It's actually important to put this on the HTML tag because the RAM unit, which we'll be using intensively, will always reference the font size which is set on the actual root tag, which is here the HTML tag. And everything, whenever we use RAM, it will be relative to this font size here. So 1 RAM will equal to 36 pixels. Good. Now For the body, let's make it a grid container, and yeah, we will just use it as a mean to center our content. Very nice. And now to actually make it centered vertically, let's put 100 VH, min vertical, min height here, 100 VH. So very nice, everything's centered vertically now. And let's give it a little bit of a prettier background. Let's make it a linear gradient, which is going to run in minus 45 degrees and from 50 to B without comma here. Good. Now that we have the layout, let's actually take care of the 3 different product variants which I've prepared here. So each product variant has a set of 2 highlight colors, HI1 and HI2, and a corresponding gradient which is making use of these 2 highlight colors, and a product image defined, because we will use the product image as a URL given here, and this will be used later on. Whenever we change the product variant, the product image URL will be used for the background image of the image tag. Now the actual images which are here, yeah, they are simply referenced, so they have been prepared before. Here's the blue phone. Good. Now let's start with the styling of the outermost container, which is the product class. Yeah, let's first define a few variables like size, which will be 22.5 rems. And yeah, you saw before that we are having 2 sections, the left one and the right one. So the size for the left section will be calculated based on the size variables and 1/3 of it. And the size right will be correspondingly defined as the size times 2 divided by 3, so 1/3 and 2/3. The image height is defined on its own, which will be just 11 rem, and based on the image aspect ratio, the image width will be 5 rems. Now, to also be able to use the same border radius consistently across all stylings, we are simply going to put it here in a variable. Yeah, and that's actually most of the variable we'll be needing. Now let's actually get to the point with the layout. Let's make this container also a grid container. And since we're having on the left side and on the right side one part, let's also define this through template columns, where we say 1 fraction and 2 fractions. Template columns, typo here. So this is 1/3 and these are the 2/3. So very nice. And since we're only, just for the sake of completeness, having 1 row, let's define this as the only row, and it gets all the space, which is basically there. Now to make sizing consistent, let's explicitly define the width and the height. The width is simply the size, and the height will be just calculated as half of the size. So we have an aspect ratio also of 1 to 2. Now to finally produce a more visible effect, let's use the Montserrat font family here and sans serif as the system default. Yeah, finally we're actually getting something to see. And let's reduce the font weight to 200 to make most things look a little bit more appealing. Now let's take actually care of the left side, which is the product image. This is actually the image container, which let's give it a background, because we have our BG gradient variable defined for each product variant. Here it is. And let's position this one here relative and shift it to the right by -2 rem, because I want the image to hang out on the left side. So we shift this a little bit more to the right by position relative and putting it on the -2 rems on the right side. Let's also make it a grid container, and I want to also center everything in it. So let's set place content as center again here. Now for the actual product image, let's select the only child. Product, missed that one. Product child. Let's select the only child, and we actually don't care what kind of tag it is, but we're going to set the height first. So we have the image height variable, and of course we also have the image width variable. So let's use it here, and directly also to make it actually visible, let's set the background image to the background image variable. Here, typo, background, very good. So let's see, it's actually, the phone is there, but you can see it's slightly misplaced. So let's actually give it the background position center, which will make something at least better. And Now let's tell it to contain the image, no matter how large it is, make it always contain. So very nice, looks good. And now to make this phone actually also hang out on the left side, we are going to put again position relative here. And now since I want to shift it to the left, we are using the left property and shift it -3 rems to the left. So you can see it's actually hanging out there. Now I see the rounded borders here are missing. So let's get this fixed by selecting every child in the product card, which is basically just the left side and the right side, and put a border radius here. Luckily we have to find it in a variable, so let's put it there. And actually let's also give it directly a box shadow to make it stand out a little bit more. So it's -0.5 rems and 0.5 rems in the vertical axis. Let's also blur it by the same amount but not grow, and the background shadow will be, the box shadow will be 0.4 alpha, and let's turn on line wrapping. Good, now I can actually see here border radius already takes effect, and here the box shadow is already in place. Very nice. Good, okay. Now for the right hand side, the product details. The actual challenge here is to actually make the positioning of all the content here easy. So we're going to use the display grid in conjunction with the grid template areas property. But before I can actually use that one, let's first define the template rows. The first row will contain the header, which will be the largest row. Then we have one row for the description. Let's also use one row for spacing, and then comes the product variant. Again, one row spacing, and finally a 2 fractional row for the capacity and the price. So we have several different rows, and the template columns will be 2 equally sized columns. So 1FR and 1FR, because mostly on the very bottom there will be on the left side the capacity, and on the right side there will be the price. If this would not be placed next to each other, we could just use one column here, but yeah, in this case we're using it. And now the template areas is truly awesome, because now we can define for the entire grid named regions, which we will be referencing later. And here we are having on the first row in both cells, this is the region for the header, and in the row below we have the description in both cells. And now I want to have an empty row, or at least no row with a named identifier. So I'm just going to put a dot for each cell, which I don't want to actually give it a name. And we have the product variants in the row below in both cells. And here is again an empty row. And finally in the last row, we have on the left side the capacity and on the right side the price. And now the cool thing is, now we can later reference these identifiers, and CSS Grid will actually take care of the positioning. So this is actually truly awesome. So now let's make also something visible here and use the BG color for the background. Yeah, positioning is a little bit messed up right now, but we will take care of that later. And give it actually also a color for the FG color. So yeah, we can finally actually see something. And actually I can see that it's a little bit sticky on the border. So let's actually put, because I have a feeling we will be using this later on, the padding of run rem into a variable and use it, down here, padding, var padding, and this will actually make it look a little bit better if I put the right spelling here. Yeah, much better. And you can see that the blue gradient is still overlapping the text. To actually fix that, let's give it the position relative, and this will fix the C-index issue. Okay, now let's actually give everything first its position. So for the product details containing an H1, we will simply use grid area header here, and don't use quotes here. Here we had to use quotes because those are actual strings, but now we are actually referencing identifiers, so no quotes are required, or actually are not even allowed. And you can see now, if I assign grid area header here, it spans both cells in the first row. So this is actually quite awesome. Makes layouting so much less of a pain. And for the describing paragraph, of course, we're using the grid area as description. And I think I messed something up with the spelling here. Description. Looks still a little bit odd, but this will get fixed as soon as we assign the right position to every tag. So next are actually the capacity. So let's give it respective grid area capacity. Yeah, let's move down. Same goes for the price here, which is inside the grid area price. Good, also gone. For the product variants, I think this one is the one which actually still messes up the layout. So let's put it inside the variant, and now let's really get this fixed by actually targeting product variants, the LI items inside. Yeah, let's first say here, this is also a grid container where we are, and also let's remove the ugly bullets. List style type equals none. Yeah, slightly better, but let's also here get this actually taken care of, where we're going to put one row and multiple columns. Let's actually put repeat. This is actually also nice function to save some typing work. We only have 3 variants, but I want to have the spacing of 5 columns. Grid template columns, and put another display type on each LI item. So let's make this one inline block. And to finally fix the layout, now let's put font size, because here this one is still wrapping, so it actually changes the reference height for each of the fractional rows. So let's simply put in here a font size of let's put 75075 rams, and yeah, perfectly fine. You can see now layout is not messed up anymore. So let's work our way again from top to bottom through the entire layout and get a few things fixed. Now for the header, which still looks a little bit odd, let's reduce the font weight to 200 again. Very good. And let's say explicitly the font size is 2 rams. And to get the capacity pretty, I want to set align self to center. So you can see now it's actually centered vertically inside the grid cell. Okay, now for the price, let's give it a nice background. We're using the background gradient variable again. And you can see that, yeah, let's explicitly also set, I mean, it's already right, but it's most in the cases very good to make things explicit. So we're using the foreground color variable here. And now let's give it a nicer shape. So let's define a little bit of a padding, 0.5 rem on the horizontal axis and 0 on the vertical axis. And to make the text centered now, let's make it place content center, and here, colon here instead of semicolon. So, and let's put this also inside a display grid. Let's also adjust the border radius. And yeah, let's make it not as extreme as it is on the outer containers. So, or let's give it a try. Let's just, yeah, it's a little bit too extreme. Let's make it, for instance, half of it. Not enough. No, let's actually use 2/3 of it. Yeah, much better. Good. Okay, now I want also the price to hang out a little bit of product card here to the right. So let's actually use position absolute here. Position absolute here now will be relative to the grid cell it is being contained in. And we are going to put the right coordinate as -1, where we are having the padding variable, because we need to get it over the padding itself. And let's actually move it 0.5 rem a little bit more to the right, so it's nicely hanging out. And to make it consume the entire width, which is actually available, let's set rem. Let's set the left property to 0 rem on the left side, so it's now consuming the entire grid cell plus a little bit more, which is quite nice here. So finally, let's take care of the product variants here, where I actually already did a few things. Let's first take care of each individual item. So let's give it a width and a height of 1 rem. So square shaped, because I want this to be circles, which is why I'm setting border radius to 50%. And let's give it a background color such that we can see them. Still seems a little bit messed up. Yeah, and actually I know why. Here there is a typo. Yeah, perfect. So we have now 3 white dots. We will change that through the variables. Yeah, because it's actually, instead of using white, we should just use the BG gradient variable. And this should, I forgot to change something here, because this one here is not the red variant, it's the orange variant. And this one here is the pink variant. So now we have actually the right colored dots, very nice. So, and now I want to make the user able to click on it, so I want to signalize that this one is actually clickable through cursor pointer. And to emphasize this effect, every product variant indicator is going to get a hover indicator, a hover selector that has a box shadow of, yeah, it's basically not shifted, not blurred, but grown by 4 pixels, and we're using the highlight secondary on the hover effect. You can see now it's getting a slight shine whenever you hover over an item. And since we're also having an active class, let's just directly put this selector here and use the same box shadow. Typo. Not again. Yeah, here now. 4px, and instead of using the second highlight, we're using the first highlight here, which is already active on the blue color. Very good. One small thing I actually forgot, because here the phone is here should have a shadow, and where we're going to put a filter as a drop shadow, because the drop shadow as a filter property really uses the alpha channel. Everything which is not transparent will contribute to the shadow, and we're going to use it as 0.1 rem shifted to the right and also to the bottom, and it's blurred by the same amount. There is no fourth parameter for the growth, but the fourth parameter here is the actual color. So let's make it a slightly faded black. And you can see here now that we are having a box shadow. It's actually not a box shadow, it's a drop shadow, which nicely aligns with the contour of the actual image. Okay, now to make the user actually able to select different variants on clicking here, we are going to need a little bit of JavaScript. So let's add a small app.js file and directly add that to the bottom of the HTML. Type is text/JavaScript, and the source attribute is as set to app.js. Good. Okay, now what we're going to put here is we need a list of all the variants we're having through document very selector all. So I want to have all the variants here, which are defined by, let's actually turn on line wrapping here, which is given through the product variants and therefore all child elements, which is basically those 3 dots here. We have the actual outer product container, which is nothing more but very selector, this time not all, because we only want the first occurrence of it, the product card. And we need a variable to track the current variable, and this one's going to be modified, which is why I'm using the let modifier, the let keyword for defining the variable. So let's here make this one big, camel cased, which is very selector, also only one occurrence. So we are having the product variants list, and the only image, the only item there which is having the active class. Good. Now I want to have a click event handler on each of the variants, and yeah, because that's why we're iterating over all variants through for each, and put an event listener on them, namely the click event, and put an arrow function here as the actual event handler. Now what we're going to do is, if the current variant is set, because for whatever reason they may not be set, but if it's actually set, we are removing the active class from the class list. So class list.remove, and let's remove the active class here. And since we're having the product variant class also on the outer container, because we have defined it here, because we need to replace that one. So we need to have the old class preserved. So the current variant dot current class name. Let's retrieve it from there. And yeah, let's also define this variable. Let old class. Yeah, let's simply initialize that one with null here. And the new class will always be the current events target element, and from there the actual class name. So now let's simply swap out. So if old class is actually set, we are going to use the products class list and replace the old class with the new class, which will simply swap it out directly. And in any other case, we will simply add the new class to the class list because there is no old class to be replaced. So this is purely a safeguard here, tracking if the current variant is set and tracking if old class is actually given or not. But I think it's yeah, worth the effort to make it actually robust. And now we rearrange the current variant and we simply rework the current selector. And here I'm going to use string interpolation because we're actually querying the current variant, which is having the current target's class name. So yeah, that's how we update the current variant. And finally, on the newly selected current variant, we are going to add the active class. So let's actually give it a go and see if that works. Yeah, wow, works even, very nice. I know something does not work. I think here that's a typo. Yeah, here now it works perfectly fine. So you can switch through the variants. So you can see just by updating the class, the CSS variables got switched out and everything adapts quite smoothly to it. Yeah, and that's already it. I hope you enjoyed creating this nice little product card with me. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Thanks for watching and see you next time.